The end of 38 BC brought with it the end of the Second Triumvirate's 5-year term of rule, which the Senate, surrounded by 30,000 armed backers of the Triumvirs, had so cheerfully sanctioned in 43 BC. However, neither Triumvir Marcus Antonius, Caesar Divi Filius, nor Marcus Aemilius Lepidus found himself in a satisfactory position at the conclusion of the period. Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who had illegally acquired the lifelong office of Pontifex Maximus, the priesthood which had actually been bequeathed to Caesar's heir, saw his landholdings diminished from all the lands of Hispania and Gallia Narbonensis to only the coastal lands of Africa. Marcus Antonius, originally in possession of Gaul and all of Rome's eastern provinces, had forfeited Gaul to his new brother-in-law, Caesar Divi Filius, following the so-called misunderstanding generated by his former wife, Fulvia's, Perugian War, and was still no closer to realizing his great ambition of conquering Parthia. And although Caesar Divi Filius had successfully acquired Hispania and Gallia Narbonensis from Lepidus, Sardinia and Corsica from Sextus Pompeius, and Gaul from Marcus Antonius, his choice to snub Sextus Pompeius by divorcing Scribonia Libo to marry Livia Drusilla had resulted in the starvation of mainland Italy, as Pompeius then reneged on the removal of his naval blockade. Furthermore, Caesar's attempt to take Sicily from the Pompeian boat king had ended in a disastrous naval defeat, for which he sought to blame Antonius, citing his failure to send aid. And so, in the spring of 37 BC, at the invitation of Caesar Divi Filius, Marcus Antonius, accompanied by his pregnant wife, Octavia, sailed for Tarentum at the head of 300 ships, wishing to discuss the possibility of prolonging the Second Triumvirate. But to his surprise, when Antonius and Octavia arrived at the heel of Italy, they were not greeted by Octavia's brother, but by Gaius Maecenas, who offered one excuse after another for Caesar's glaring absence, while simultaneously accusing Antonius of having abandoned Caesar during his hour of need. Enraged by the great disrespect shown him by his brother-in-law's absence, Marcus Antonius made plans to sail back to Athens. But, according to Plutarch, at this vital moment, Octavia intervened and convinced her husband to send her as an ambassador to her brother's home, where she might facilitate the necessary meeting. At Caesar's villa in Tarentum, Octavia, who was approximately 6 months pregnant with her second child by Antonius, presented herself to her brother, who was accompanied by Gaius Maecenas and Marcus Agrippa. There, she pleaded with him not to make her most unhappy and wretched by allowing the threat of civil war to once again emerge within Rome. Although we are told by Plutarch and Cassius Dio that Octavia quickly won over Agrippa and Maecenas, Octavia's brother did not trust her husband. At once, Caesar accused Antonius of breaking the Treaty of Brundisium, failing to support his naval maneuvers against Sextus Pompeius, resulting in his catastrophic defeat at Cumae and now Locus. In defense of her husband, Octavia let it be known that her husband had already absolved himself of these charges before Gaius Maecenas, who had leveled the same accusations upon their arrival in Tarentum. Her husband was engaged in defending Rome's eastern borders, she countered, which were breached by a Parthian invasion, taking him from Athens at that time and requiring his presence at the siege of Samosata. Caesar next accused Antonius of breaking the Pact of Misenum by refusing to surrender to Sextus Pompeius the annual revenues collected in southern Greece, antagonizing the boat king into reinstating his blockade of Italy's grain shipments. We are not told exactly how Octavia handled this accusation, but it seems likely that she would have highlighted her brother's own actions in divorcing Scribonia Libo, the aunt of Sextus Pompeius, almost before the ink had dried on the Pact of Misenum's parchment. Word had also reached Caesar Divi Filius that Marcus Antonius had sent one of his freedmen, a man named Callias, to Africa in order to negotiate with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Caesar accused Antonius and Lepidus of creating a secret alliance against him, conspiring to remove him from power. To this, Octavia provided confirmation that Callias had been sent to Africa by her husband with the purpose of negotiating with Lepidus, but not in regards to her brother, nor to the Triumvirate. Callias had gone to Africa to begin making the necessary arrangements for the marriage of Octavia's stepdaughter, Antonia, to the son of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, a well-publicized betrothal that had been announced 6 years earlier in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination. If the worst should prevail, urged Octavia to her brother, and there should be war between you, one of you, it is uncertain which, is destined to conquer, and one to be conquered. But my lot, in either case, will be one of misery. Although these exact words were most likely placed in Octavia's mouth by the historian Plutarch, who lived a century later, the accurate sentiments they expressed did succeed in convincing Caesar Divi Filius to meet with Marcus Antonius face to face. Although it's doubtful that the two generals were genuinely close to civil war, given that each needed something the other had, and that neither was strong enough to take out his opponent, Caesar and Antonius nonetheless sat down to negotiations, with Octavia acting as mediator. Marcus Antonius owned a massive fleet of ships, having collected some from defeated opponents such as Brutus and Cassius, and some from pardoned Pompeian admirals such as Lucius Stius Murcus and Gnaeus Domitius Enobarbus, the son of Lucius Domitius Enobarbus, who had died fighting for Pompeius Magnus at Pharsalus. Alas, with his upcoming plans to invade and subjugate the kingdom of Parthia, such a large fleet was utterly useless. Marcus Antonius needed foot soldiers. Having buttressed his own forces by taking the legions of the consuls Hirtius and Pansa, as well as the 11 Gallic legions that had once belonged to Marcus Antonius, Caesar Divi Filius had a large number of legions, which did him little good against Sextus Pompeius, who fought on the water. Caesar needed ships, and Antonius needed men. In what is referred to in the annals of history as the Treaty of Tarentum, Marcus Antonius and Caesar Divi Filius instituted another pact. Antonius offered Caesar 100 of the ships which had accompanied them to Italy. During the mediations, we are also told that Octavia convinced her husband to give her brother an additional 20 ships, to which Marcus Antonius agreed as a courtesy to his wife. In exchange for the 120 ships, which were immediately available for Caesar's possession, Octavia, motivated by fear that her husband would seek the support of Egypt's Queen Cleopatra to fund his conquest of Parthia, persuaded her brother to levy and equip 20,000 new legionaries, to be immediately delivered to Marcus Antonius upon completion of their military training. Caesar Divi Filius, afraid that Marcus Antonius might otherwise seek an alliance with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, or worse yet, Sextus Pompeius, agreed to the exchange. In addition to the swap of military wherewithal, and notwithstanding the fact that there were no senatorial representatives on hand to witness the momentous occasion, Caesar and Antonius also agreed to grant themselves a 5-year extension of their triumviral authority. We do not know if Marcus Aemilius Lepidus was in attendance at this meeting, but the Treaty of Tarentum was signed between Caesar Divi Filius and Marcus Antonius, with the Senate being notified of the decision at a later date. To seal the deal, Caesar's almost 2-year-old daughter, Julia, was betrothed to Antyllus, Antonius's 10-year-old son by Fulvia. To cement the loyalty of his admiral, the once Pompeian Gnaeus Domitius Enobarbus, Marcus Antonius betrothed Antonia, his infant daughter by Octavia, to Enobarbus's 8-year-old son, Lucius. To commemorate the Treaty of Tarentum and publicly memorialize the role Octavia had once again played in bringing about peace for Rome, Marcus Antonius issued a number of coins be struck, some engraved with the busts of Antonius and Caesar, with the bust of Octavia on the obverse, others of Antonius on one side, his wife Octavia on the other. Although it suited Marcus Antonius to have his wife revered by the public as Rome's ultimate peacemaker, it is highly unlikely that Octavia's involvement had any real effect on the outcome of the negotiations at Tarentum. Neither Marcus Antonius nor Caesar Divi Filius intended to be yoked to the other for the rest of his life. War would eventually come between them, but the time was not now. Because each still required something from the other, the triumvirs would eventually have reached an agreement, even without Octavia. Caesar, who was building his own secret fleet and arming thousands of legionaries in the secluded regions of Lake Averno, needed to defeat Sextus Pompeius before he even thought about taking on Marcus Antonius. For Marcus Antonius, the conquest and subjugation of Parthia would make him even greater than Julius Caesar. Then Antonius could rid himself, once and for all, of Caesar Divi Filius.